So I guess we are back on air. So let me just start with a short introduction of you, and I will hand over to you in a minute. We have Joe Donarumo and Keyan Zandy connected. I'm not sure whether we are really properly on air. Can I have some feedback, please?
Yeah, can you hear us?
I can hear you. You can hear me properly?
Yes.
Because I don't. Okay, then let me start with the introduction. So, Joe and Keyan, thank you for being around. You are the authors of The Lean Builder. And The Lean Builder is a business fable written for field leaders and last planners to help them begin their lean journey with respect to lean implementation on the field level. And it simplifies and clearly articulates the benefits of the 7 primary lean concepts. And today we have the privilege to learn firsthand from you, from the authors of the Lean Builders. So welcome, Joe Donarumo and Keyan Zandy. And let me start with a very brief introduction of Joe. Joe Donarumo is not only leading high-performing field teams at Linbeck's healthcare, but he's also the director of lean application. And Joe has a unique passion for lean implementations, continuous improvement, and waste elimination. And I'm sure you will introduce it to us and give us much more insight. Keyan Zandy is a longtime lean practitioner and enthusiast, and he's an advocate. As Chief Operational Officer at Skiles Group, he's making sure that lean processes are continuously improved and consistently practiced. And so we expect your common presentation on building blocks for builders lean. What does that mean? It is presented in a field-friendly manner. And so let's expect us all an insight how to applicate lean in the field on our projects. So Joe and Keyan, the floor is yours, and happy to have you here.
Thanks, Klaus.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Well, again, we'll go ahead and start with a brief introduction. My name's Joe Donarumo. I'm a senior superintendent as well as a director of lean application for Linbeck. We're a medium-sized general contractor located in Houston, Texas, and we primarily work in the healthcare market sector.
My name is Keyan Zandy. I'm COO of Skiles Group. Skiles Group is a general contractor based in Dallas, Texas. We primarily focus on healthcare construction, building hospitals in around 13 states across the United States.
So it's an honor to be here in front of you guys today and to be able to speak on something that both Keyan and I are so passionate about, and that's field tools and methodologies leveraged in the field. Well, we wanted to start today's presentation with why, because oftentimes in our journey, Keyan and I see either teams or companies who are interested and see value in lean dive in, and oftentimes lean will either end, it won't end in success, and a lot of times they'll have this bad taste left in their mouth in regards to lean. And we like to pause there because we find that oftentimes these teams and these companies just dive in head first, and they start with the tools and they start with the processes, and they don't pause and really start to think about the people and really start to think about the culture and what they're trying to establish on that job site or within their company, and setting up those mechanisms and those smaller tools that's going to help cultivate trust, mutual respect, and accountability. And the really 3 tenets of the culture that you really have to sustain to really implement all the tools effectively and to really drive forward and have lasting success with lean. So we really want to take time today to unpack how you can really put rubber to the road. How can you establish the right culture on your project or within your firm that's going to yield you the opportunity to implement lean and have lasting success?
You know, we wrote our book, like we've mentioned, we are not consultants or academics. We are lean, or we're construction operations practitioners. Our day-to-day is the construction business. But kind of like what Joe's lining out is for our field leaders, our project superintendents, our foremen, the people that are actually putting the work in place, we never felt like there has been a publication that has been geared directly towards them. While there's been a lot of great research papers done, manufacturing books like Toyota Way, there hasn't been anything specifically for project superintendents, last planners in the field that we felt that would really explain how they're supposed to be implementing lean. And so this presentation and the way we set it up is a lot of times consultants or academics or folks that are passionate about lean in a more senior leadership role, they want to immediately jump into the last planner system and start implementing the tools that way in the field. But there's a lot of things that got to be done in the field before they're even able to start implementing last planner. And so not sure if that translates over in Germany, but if it does, then I feel like this presentation will help, because what Joe and I really want to talk about is what you need to do before you start implementing last planner in the field so that it really sticks.
So within the book and within this presentation today, we're going to talk about 3 specific tools that's going to help you grow and cultivate that lean culture that we're talking about of trust and mutual respect and accountability. That's going to help you move into last planner system, as Keyan just described. The first is going to be daily huddle, and switching from oftentimes what general contractors will have with their trade partners as a long weekly subcontractor meeting, breaking that up and having a daily huddle either in the morning or the afternoon to talk about the work at hand. So let's talk about oftentimes what the typical subcontractor meeting can look like before you switch to a daily huddle. In my previous state, when I entered into this industry, what my weekly meeting looked like, I would come into the trailer, I would print off the schedule, I'd slap it down on the table, and I would try to dictate, and I would push down onto the guys what we were doing that week, what the schedule was entailed, and what did I needed them to do. And it never failed. I would get extremely low engagement. I'd have guys on their phone texting, they'd be ruffling around, either trying to get some more focused on the donuts, and their eyes would be glazing over 20 minutes in to the weekly subcontractor meeting. The meetings were long. Guys would get tired. They would get fatigued from just sitting through an hour to hour and a half meeting once a week. They would take too long. There would often be arguments. If guys were engaged, half the time they were only engaged so they could grind an axe and yell at the trade partner across the table, because they stopped them from being able to put their work into place the following week, and they just wanted an opportunity to pick at and to grind an axe with that trade partner. And it never failed. You also had, the trade partner that wanted to talk only about the issues that affected him. What was in his way, he'd often go on a filibuster or a monologue about something that really didn't involve everyone else in that entire meeting that day.
Yeah, Joe, my experience was very similar to that. I always felt like those subcontractor meetings with our trades were very adversarial. It was kind of an us versus them. And then when the trades got to speak, they were always arguing and fighting with each other. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, the way we led those meetings as a general contractor was very top-down approach. We told everybody what the schedule was. We told everybody where they should be working. And that was about it. We really didn't allow the trades to collaborate. We really didn't listen to what they had to say if we thought that they weren't going to meet our schedule. And it just was a really poor way to run a meeting.
Absolutely. So why huddle? So why transition? If you find yourself in a meeting structure like this, where you're meeting weekly, it's about an hour, hour and a half, and you're trying to communicate and collaborate on everything that's taking place in the job at one meeting once a week. What's the value in it? Why should you think about switching to a daily huddle, breaking that long meeting up and having a short 15-minute huddle each and every day? And it's going to allow you a lot of different things that we're going to get into here in a second. But let me give you some tips on how to actually structure. Here's some guidelines of how to hold a successful daily huddle. The first one's keep it short. This one might be tough when you're transitioning from that long hour to hour and a half weekly subcontractor meeting. Get an egg timer out or get your phone out, set a timer for 15 minutes and stick to it. Number 2, start on time, end on time. This might seem a little trivial. Joe, why are you talking about starting and ending on time? But this is really important because this is a demonstration as you as a field leader or superintendent, if you're starting that meeting on time and you're ending it on time, you're demonstrating to the trade partners who are coming to your daily huddle that you respect them, that you respect what they have to do, and that you know that they're busy and they need to get back out to the field. So you're demonstrating and building that culture of trust and mutual respect to your trade partners who are attending. Number 3, no phones or distractions. This one's real easy. When you're at a daily huddle and you have some team members that are engaged and you're talking about a problem or a constraint, and one of those leaders steps away from the discussion to answer the phone, they've effectively demonstrated to everyone else in the meeting that the person on their phone or the text was more important than the individuals and the leaders in that meeting. And it breaks down that culture of mutual respect that you're trying to establish with that project team. Number 4, stand up. When field leaders are standing up for a meeting, they're likely to be more engaged, they're likely to listen better, and they're likely to collaborate and engage better with the team. It's oftentimes if you can get in a chair and you're comfy and maybe it's cold out or it's hot out and you're in the cozy trailer, the guys can get a little bit lackadaisical and not engaged in the discussion in the meeting taking place. Number 5, get in a routine. When you decide to step into this meeting of a daily huddle and you're going to get in this rigor, do not start it on Monday, have one on Tuesday. Hey, things are going great. Let's take Wednesday and Thursday off and we'll pick it back up on Friday. Be consistent. If you start to transition to this type of meeting, do it daily and stick with it, and you're going to see the fruit that comes out of it. 6, stay on track. So 2 tools specifically that we're going to talk about helping to stay on track. The first one is Elmo. Elmo is an acronym for Enough, Let's Move On. It's a respectful way for maybe a superintendent to tell a trade partner, hey, what you have to say is important, but it doesn't involve everyone in this meeting discussion right now. I'm going to go over and I'm going to take your concern and I'm going to put it in the parking lot. The parking lot is just a placeholder where you can go take those items that need to be talked about, but they don't impact the workflow for that day and they don't involve everyone in the meeting. And this will help you successfully keep the meeting on track while demonstrating to the trade partners that you heard them, that you respect them, and that you're going to follow up on the item. It just doesn't involve everyone else, and it's going to bog down the meeting if we spend any more time on it. And lastly, involve the entire team. As a superintendent, I struggled with this one for a while. I kind of have that mentality that, hey, if it's within the job fence, I control it, I got it. However, as I grew in my lean journey, I realized that I was so much more powerful when my project manager and engineer were at that meeting and they could answer questions on RFIs or submittals or change orders without me having to go follow up, get the answer, and go back out and deliver that information to the trade. We could get the information in real time from those leaders being at the huddle, and it just made it that much more of a successful meeting. So takeaways, I referenced to this before we got into kind of the rules of how to implement a successful daily huddle and what you can expect to take away if you transition from that long weekly subcontractor meeting to a short, compressed daily huddle. You're going to have higher engagement from your trade partner leaders that are attending that meeting. You're going to have a much shorter meeting. Although you're going to have more meetings, they're going to be shorter and more focused. You're getting away from that top-down approach of that longer weekly subcontractor meeting, and you're having a much more collaborative discussion. You're providing a platform for those trade partners to be able to engage and coordinate and collaborate with one another. You have the battle on the job sites often one from the communication making itself from the job trailers to the man or the woman in the field. And you have much more effective delivery of the communication with this style of a meeting. And then lastly, you have better trade-to-trade relationships. You're going to start to see the relationships also change among the trade partners. Instead of calling each other tin benders or sparkies or guys referring to each other by their company name, you're going to start seeing guys call each other by their first name. They're going to start to build a relationship, and you're going to start to see that culture of flourishing of trust, mutual respect, and accountability just by switching to this type of meeting structure.
So you guys may be thinking, well, this is pretty simple, this is basic, but I challenge you, are you having daily huddles on your project across all your projects? And if you are you following these rules? Are you really getting the most out of your huddle? And if you are, then you're probably wondering, well, what are we supposed to be talking about in the huddle? And obviously, as you progress in your journey with Lean, what you're really going to want to be talking about is that weekly work plan. But before you get there, that can be a lot to bite off if you're a superintendent or a field leader that's never even done a daily huddle, that's never been empowered to think. And so we'd like to start this presentation on just talking about why you should do a daily huddle and the rules for those huddles. And we're going to kind of build you up into what you should be talking about and how to get the most out of those huddles. Which leads us to our next section, which is visual communication. So once you get this cadence going, once you get everybody in the room and you're following these rules and everybody's engaged, the next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to leverage the power of visual communication.
I like to start this section off by telling a story. And so let's go back in time to I'm having that long weekly subcontractor meeting. And during this meeting, the sheetrocker is talking to everyone. He's like, hey guys, I plan on manning up on Thursday. I'm going to have all of the rock delivered for the second floor zone A, and we're going to get going. Please make sure you have all your in-wall inspections signed off. Everything's good to go because I'm manning up and we're going to hit it. So Tuesday, we're talking about that. Thursday's coming around the corner. Thursday rolls up, and I never forget, I'm in the job trailer, and the electrician comes into the trailer, and he's fuming. He's mad. He's screaming. He's very adversarial. He's ready to go. And he's like, what the heck is going on out in the field? Why is the drywaller covering me up on the second floor? I don't have my in-wall inspection yet. I'm like, dude, Dan, we just talked about that Tuesday in the subcontractor meeting. He told everyone that he's bringing his material, he's manning up, and he's going. He's like, well, I didn't hear him. I didn't know that's what he was doing. And it goes to show Keyan's really going to highlight the importance of visual communication, what it does. But if you don't have a visual tool that everyone can resonate with and everyone can understand, the communication is not as effective as it can be.
No, Joe, you're absolutely right. I'll share a story from earlier in my career. I was locking up a project on a Friday afternoon. It's around 5, 6 o'clock. Everybody was gone. And as I'm locking up, I see this big truck full of pallets of masonry coming to the job site. And I just knew exactly how I'd be spending the next hour would be helping this guy unload all the brick because the mason had left a few hours earlier. And so I remember that next morning, came back on a Saturday, met the mason, and had called my superintendent and had told him that what I was dealing with the night before. And his response to me was, Keyan, get used to it. That's just how the business is. Guys are always delivering material, when you don't expect it. You better get used to that. And that frustrated me. And so I had built a material delivery board, and I said, we got to do this better. And I told all the trades, I said, hey, if you have a delivery, I want to see it on this board. That way we are monitoring what comes in and out of the job site. And it worked really well. And the trades knew we were serious when we started sending some deliveries home that weren't on the board. And so when I went to my next project, I wanted to implement this same board because I saw the amount of waste that was coming in the job when we weren't monitoring material. And you would know the amount of frustration that I had when I got a call from the president of a hospital. We were building on an occupied campus, and he was calling me to tell me that we had a flatbed full of sheetrock blocking the entrance to his ER, and there was an ambulance trying to come through. And so I ran down there and started yelling at the drywall foreman what was going on. And his first response was, "Hey, Keyan, it was on the board." And so I said, "Okay, we got to do a new rule with the board. We want to know what kind of materials coming out, how it's coming out, where it's going to be unloaded, what the unload area is, like really making sure our trade partners were thinking through their deliveries." And so visual communication is not just about floor plans up on the wall. It can be a lot of different things. And the way we like to do it on our projects is we like to have anything we can in the field to be visual. We want to make it visual. So in some sections, like the first picture you see, we'll color code our floor plans. We'll put them up on the wall, and everybody understands what phase 1 looks like and phase 2 looks like, phase 3. We'll hand out dry erase markers. Every trade partner has a certain dry erase color. And like to Joe's example, that drywall foreman would say, "Hey, on Thursday, I'm starting here." And he would draw on the floor plan, visually showing everybody where he's working. And then that way the electrician would say, whoa, you can't start there until I get my inspection. If you're on a bigger project where you have televisions, we have these, I call them our lean machines. They're a NAC data vault. In the field, we'll have floor plans up. We'll let the field leaders plan together in the field. We'll have delivery boards. We'll have inspection boards. But ultimately, when we have these things, what you'll start to notice is that everything becomes more tangible. People are actually understand what we're talking about when we speak in the field. The alignment gets better. The workflow, everybody understands where the project's going. They know that, okay, if we're going to be framing walls in area B, then we're going to be laying out walls in area C. And that means after those guys move to the next phase, then we're going to start our in-wall rough, and everybody can kind of see that. And then finally, by letting the trades talk about their work visually, the collaboration really starts to grow, and the trades start to transitioning from being in a race with each other to more playing a team sport, because now they're trying to make sure that they all can keep going at the same speed.
Yep. All right. So now we're progressing in our journey. We've talked about daily huddles. We've talked about visual communication. And really that third pillar, that third step is how you manage constraints that pop up in the field, and how do you resolve those as a team. I like to start with, again, the previous state of how I used to handle this. And as a superintendent, it would probably look like I get a phone call from a trade partner. I put on my PPE. I go out to the field. Trade partner would show me an issue. I would determine and disseminate, okay, who's responsible for this? Who can remove it? I go call that responsible trade partner. The three of us come together. We make a plan, establish a time frame of when that's going to be resolved. And as a superintendent, I would write it down on like my note cards. I would have this like a little notepad that I keep in my pocket. And it wasn't until later on in my journey when I started to really implement lean tools that I started to realize the amount of waste that I was responsible for, of making sure all the onus on making sure an issue in the field or a constraint was removed was on me as a superintendent. I felt like I was the conduit, or I was the vehicle that would link up these two trade partners that need to actually just talk to each other, but I was the conduit and the vehicle to make sure that the communication flowed and that there was a plan in place. And it was very inefficient. And I found myself spending the better part of each and every day just tracking down constraints and making sure people were doing what they said they were doing.
Yeah, the thing about constraints, I used to manage all the constraints in an Excel document. The problem is that when it's in Excel, or it's in a tool like Procore or something like that, it's not visual. Mm-hmm. And the problem with constraints is that the ball in court always changes. An example we like to give is that I remember on a project, the painter came and said, "Hey, we still don't have selections for paint color in the lobby." So we had to go ask the architect, what was the paint color? Well, the architect says, well, actually, I'm waiting on the owner. So now the ball in court was with the owner. Well, the owner says, well, hey, I like these three colors. I like to see a mock-up. So now the constraint is back on the painter. So the painter does the mock-up. Now it's back going to the owner and architect to make the selection. And so the constraints move on a project. And it isn't until you have the field feeling empowered to understand what the constraints are, and by taking those constraints and making them visual, that you really start to see a benefit.
So in the spirit of keeping our communication visual, what Keyan and I decided is, hey, we got to get these constraints and we got to put them in front of the entire team at the daily huddle. And that's exactly what we did. We came up with some very simple constraint boards. So now when we're in that daily huddle and an issue pops up, we can quickly jot it down on the board. The team members know that we're going to follow up on it. But the biggest takeaway that came from this is we were able to identify the person who is responsible and the commitment date. And we were able to put that on the visual board in front of the team. And it transformed the accountability. It transformed the way that the guys would have the urgency to remove a constraint, because they didn't want to have to come back to that huddle the next day and report out that they didn't do what they said they were going to do in resolving the constraint. So the workflow began to shore up, to be more reliable, and the accountability went through the roof. So takeaways, if you are currently not managing your constraints in this manner, what can you expect to take away from managing them in a more visual manner? Again, accountability goes through the roof. You're going to have much more engagement and accountability amongst those trade partners. You're going to have more awareness of the root cause of the issue. And lastly, you're going to have faster resolution speed. Instead of the superintendent being the conduit connecting the trade partner to trade partner, they're now going to be able to report out. The issues are going to be front and center in front of the entire project team, and it's going to be resolved in a faster manner.
So I'll pause here for a second. Now, in our minds, if you're doing this in the field, your field leaders are ready for the last planner system. Fortunately, today we don't have much time to cover all the last planner system. Joe and I could talk about last planner system for days on end, but we just wanted to really make sure that everybody understands like the building blocks in the field to get those leaders engaged, talking, empowered, ready to collaborate, is by leveraging a daily huddle with visual communication tools, including a constraint board. Once that magic starts to happen, once those guys really start to engage, now we feel like you're ready for the last planner system. So Joe, you want to talk about what is the last planner system?
I am. Yeah, again, as Keyan said, we're going to focus just a little bit in depth on one particular portion of last planner today, but holistically wanted to give you a quick overview. So the last planner system is a production management tool that's really broken up into 5 specific layers. The first one being no different than what a lot of you currently probably do on your projects, which is mastering the workflow through a master schedule or a CPM schedule. And then from there, it breaks down into 4 separate phases of phase scheduling, look ahead planning, weekly work planning, and percent plan complete. So if you're not familiar with last planner system, what are some of the values that you can take away, or why use it? This type of management system removes the silos. It's a much more engaging, collaborative way of managing work. It is oftentimes the basis of how it works is you end up pulling from a deliverable instead of pushing yourself through a schedule, just using forecasting. You're really applying the right work at the right time to deliver on a milestone. Again, you're going to be able to make much more reliable commitments because you're using a management system that's based on trust, accountability, and mutual respect. You're going to have improved project direction and flow because you're going to harness and leverage the professional expertise of your trade partners instead of working through a plan or a schedule that was made by a superintendent or home office scheduler. You're now using all that knowledge to your benefit as the project team. You're going to create more trust and accountability through, again, leveraging those trade partners and utilizing those subject matter experts. And lastly, you're going to identify and address the root causes for incomplete work. You're going to learn and study the reasons why commitments weren't met so that you can have the understanding and the awareness and the learning so that when you make your work plan for the next week, you can put those buffers in place and you can establish the most reliable workflow possible for that team. Where do teams go wrong? I started on kind of hit on this at the onset of the presentation. Oftentimes the teams focus on the tools first. They don't start with the culture. They don't start with the people. They just dive in headfirst in the tools, and the culture's not there to sustain the team for the long run. Sometimes lack of training can be an issue, and oftentimes we see a lot of teams just do pull planning and they think that's lean. That's what it is. It's just you pull back from a date, and pull planning's lean. And again, pull planning and phase scheduling is just one little piece of a larger holistic operating system, and you don't get the benefit unless you're implementing all those steps in the correct manner for the team.
So speaking of pull planning, which is what we'll have time for today, a lot of times field leaders have a little bit of trouble understanding the difference between push scheduling versus pull scheduling. In our industry, critical path method, Gantt scheduling is basically the way we've always done it. And so I feel like it's important to really explain to the field what pull planning is about, and really the difference between push versus pull. And so, usually I like to start by explaining, a lot of us in construction drive a lot. And, how do you like to how do you fill up your vehicle, for instance? And so if you were on doing it via push, you would be forecasting when you need to fill up your vehicle with gas. So, maybe you think, okay, well, I'm going to fill up Sunday night because I know I got to drive Monday, Tuesday, and by Wednesday afternoon, I should have driven maybe 350 miles or so. So I'm going to fill up Wednesday afternoon, and then I got to drive Thursday, Friday, and I'll fill up again Saturday afternoon. And that's kind of a forecasted or a push schedule. Pull, when it comes to filling up your vehicle with gas, is that you would fill it up when the light comes on. You're waiting for the demand. Once the demand's there, then you go. And so many of us in construction, focus more on push, that it's kind of difficult. And even that example really doesn't help the field leaders so much. And so another example that I like to give is taking a trip and going to the airport. And what we'll do is we'll pass out some sticky cards, and on those cards we're looking for an activity, which is a thing that needs to be done. We're looking for a duration, which is how long that activity takes to complete, and then we're looking for a handoff, which is the thing that needs to be completed for the activity to happen, which is also the predecessor. And so in our example of what does it take if you had a flight to catch at, let's say, 10 o'clock, what time do you need to be packing the bag at your house to make sure you make your flight? And I think for a lot of us who take a lot of flights, naturally, at least for me, I always pull back from my flight. And so example that we like to run with our field leaders is, okay, so what would be the last thing that you would do before you get onto your flight? And that is to walk to your gate. And let's say that takes 5 minutes. Well, what's the handoff? What do you need to do to walk to the gate? Well, you need to get through security. In order to get through security, and let's say that takes you giving yourself 20 minutes, you need to get your boarding pass and check in. In order to get your boarding pass and check in, which we're going to give ourselves 15 minutes, you got to park your vehicle. In order to park your vehicle, you need to drive to the airport. In order to drive to the airport, which let's say you've given yourself 30 minutes, you need to pack your bag. And for the purpose of our example, packing your bag is the first thing you do. So Joe, check my math here. I think this is 1 hour and 40 minutes.
Yep.
So if we need to leave and catch our flight at 10 o'clock, we need to be leaving our house or starting to pack our bag by 8:20. Well, what if it's 8:45? And this is what we come up against on our projects all the time, right? If we do a pull plan session with the field on 2 siding walls, or to finish out a project, to get done, and we pull back and we realize, hey, we should have started 2 siding walls 3 weeks ago, we're behind schedule. Well, we don't just, say, well, tough, everybody's got to work overtime and this is the way it is. No, what we're able to do through a pull plan session is we start looking at those handoffs, we start looking at the phasing, we start looking for where the flow is, and we start to see if there's any way that we can go back and pick up time by taking a look at the commitments. And so going back to our airport example, let's take a look. Instead of walking to the gate, this would be fun. What if we run to the gate and we pick up 2 minutes? And then instead of getting our boarding pass and checking in, which was 15 minutes, what if we get an electronic boarding pass and carry on our bag? Now we've picked up 13 minutes. So total, we've saved 15 minutes. Now take a look at the activities of parking a car and driving to the airport. Both of those equal 40 minutes. Well, what if you take a taxi or you Uber to the airport? Now you've picked up 10 minutes because you're not parking. And so ultimately, we got our time back and we make our flight. That's the benefit of doing a pull plan session in the field. Just like in this example, it works very well on our projects, especially through tough turnovers, tough constructability type items. And so usually when we do this example with the field, they really start to understand the benefits of putting their workflow up on the wall and then doing a reverse phase schedule. On our projects, here's some pictures of what that looks like. And what I'll share for the purpose of this presentation is what we feel like our best practices before your pull session, during, and after. And so before, what we like to do is we like to decide on the milestone we want to pull. So in my firm, Skiles Group, we pull plan at every milestone. So we'll pull from, foundation back to start, building erected back to foundation, dry in back down to erection, air on to dry in, finish out to air on. We like to pick a facilitator. I'd recommend not having it be the project team, project manager, or superintendent, maybe somebody not part of the project, just so that the project manager and superintendent can really be engaged within the pull plan. Make sure you have the right trade partners attending and make sure that they're ready, that they know what they're there to pull. Do a pre-pull with your team. Have your team go and mock through the sticky cards themselves. Think about the phasing. Are we going to do priority walls first or not? What's going up first, ductwork or walls? Think about those things as a team through a pre-pull. And then finally, get your meeting room set up with all the stickies and calendar boards and cards and everything that you would need. During the pull session, it's important to really lay out the ground rules, let the trades understand that they're there to be a part of a collaborative scheduling session and then that their feedback is valued. Teach them how to fill out the cards, make sure that they're filling out cards correctly. On our cards, we really don't like trades to go more than 10 days. It never fails. The painter always has one card. It says paint and it's like 40 days. And so we really want him to break his work out by area or by phase. And so that's important. And then once everybody's got their cards filled out, let everybody get those up on the board. The way we do it, we don't mind if we start at the beginning or the end. We like to get it up on the wall, whatever feels comfortable with the team. But before we leave, we're really going to pull our way back from the end to the start. And then finally, we want to recap with everybody in that room to make sure that everybody felt like they were heard, that their durations they feel like they can meet, and that they could start making the commitments that based on the durations and the handoffs. And then finally, after the pull session, it's so important to document the pull plan. So if you're doing traditional stickies, don't leave the room. When the trades leave, you need to be there taking that information, putting it back into your master schedule, and then going into your 6-week look ahead to issue your first 6-week look ahead. If you're doing virtual or using technology, some benefits of that is there's no wasted step of the re-entry. That's the one thing I don't like about pull planning is that once the stickies are up and everything's done, then there is that wasted step of taking that information and putting it back into a technology tool. If you're doing it virtually, in some cases, you don't have to do that. But ultimately, the benefits your teams will experience by implementing the pull planning as part of Last Planner system is now the general contractor schedule is validated by the trades. Now it's a team schedule. The flow of the work has been thought through. It's not just all the trades coming in there and starting to just race to throw their work up, ductwork going in, who's first. Everybody's understands the flow and the sequence. There's a much greater awareness of where trades are working and what's going on the project. And then finally, the collaboration and the communication becomes way more consistent. without pull planning sessions and those opportunities for trades to work together and start to talk, a lot of times they only want to use the superintendent as the conduit. When you have these sessions, they begin to start understanding who each other are, and they start working together much better. So Joe, you want to recap us?
Yep. So recapping our discussion today and the key points that we made, here's some photos and some examples of what these looked like on some of the projects that Keyan and I work on. Here's a look at our daily huddles with those job teams huddling each day to talk about the work at hand, the workflow, and any constraints that are coming up that need to be eliminated to establish a reliable workflow for that day.
And you guys can make the leap, and we talk about this in our book, but obviously, as you continue to progress with Last Planner, all of it becomes visual. And so what you see up there is a 3-week look ahead board, which is your weekly planning board. You see the constraint board, you start seeing the visual boards. The whole system becomes visual.
Yep. Again, examples of the visual boards that Keyan just talked about. You see the 3-week boards there, delivery boards, our PPC boards, and our constraint boards. And again, that's just kind of the basis. We use boards that come up that might be job specific. We've created boards to track rework because we were having some issues with design team collaboration with our partners, and we needed to demonstrate and show the amount of rework that we were having in the field. You can create any type of board or a visual communication tool that adds value to that team and talk about it in that daily huddle. And lastly, pull plans, some pictures from one of Keyan's pull planning sessions at Skiles, where you have all those subject matter experts, all those trade partners there talking about the work, talking about the way that it makes sense to sequence the work, to work through this project, and you're harnessing all that information and all that experience and making a schedule and a plan that's going to yield the most value to the team, and it's going to allow for the greatest implementation of that schedule.
Guys, we also have a online community at the website, theleanbuilder.com. Every week, we post a blog written by field leaders or Joe or myself talking specifically about field applied lean. So please check that out as a resource. If you're interested in sharing something for the blog, we'd love to feature your content. Our goal is to try to have as many resources available for field leaders to implement lean on their projects. Thank you so much for the opportunity today.
Thanks, everyone.
So thank you very much, Joe and Keyan, for giving us some insight in what you're thinking, what your book contains, and how you think lean can be implemented in the field very well. There is one question, quite an interesting question, that that asks how to do all this implementation in high-rise buildings. So the question is, do you have experience in lean construction regarding high-rise buildings? Working on more than 40 stories at the same time is hard to manage daily huddles and visualization at work. Is there, and do you have any ideas or tools that might help?
Joe, do you mind if I start?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we do have experience in high rise. A lot of my experience is in healthcare construction, especially if you've ever worked in or around a hospital environments 24/7, very technical. You can't bring men and material through the front door. You have a lot of very complex systems. You're working inside a facility with patients and doctors, and so it's very complex. And the same thing can be said about any size building. What I always like to ask the question back is how do you manage your project and your schedules in your current state? It's no different. If you're doing subcontractor meetings in your current state, there's no difference transitioning to lean implementation and last planner system. You probably, on those large buildings, you probably have a field superintendent that is responsible for the core and shell, building the building out of the ground. You probably have a field superintendent that's responsible for interior construction and doing the finish out of that building. And so like on our projects where we are doing large, $100+ million projects, we have different sets of boards. We do different pull sessions with different superintendents and the teams that they're working with. It's no different. It's how we manage the work from what we currently are doing to transitioning into the lean state. Joe?
I would wholeheartedly agree, because chances are in your current state, you're probably having, again, like Keyan said, different meetings for different aspects of the project, and you can implement the lean tools and methodologies in the same manner. For some of our larger high-rise complex healthcare jobs, that's exactly what we did. We had superintendents that were responsible for certain floors, for building facade, MEPs, and we would have separate huddles and separate pull sessions for the appropriate work and the different scopes of work. And one thing that I found too in establishing what's the right way to tackle that, involve your trade partners in that discussion at the onset. As the GC, don't just say, well, this is how we're going to have our meetings. This is what makes sense to us. Bring the trade partners in, talk about what's your plan to manage the work, the meeting structure, and involve them in that decision-making process, and make your meeting schedules and the way you're going to structure the meetings, do pull plans, have your daily huddles, have their input involved, because you're also going to increase the buy-in and the accountability from those trade partners in your decision for structuring on that project.
Thank you very much. May I ask a question from my perspective, just dealing with exactly this content. There was very much about pull in what you shared with us in the last minutes. There is a part of the question that talks about parallelization. So 40 floors and all in parallel. I believe that maybe you have an idea how much is pull, how much is sequence, and how much is really working in parallel on a high-rise building. Could you give us some more insights in that?
Yeah, I think I understand the question. I think the way I want to answer it is, I want to talk about scheduling just for a second. And I don't know if it's similar in the States as it is in Germany, but you know, a general contractor here can be very proud of their Gantt schedule. We could use Primavera P6. It could have 20,000 line items to it. It could be a beautiful schedule. The logic all works. But the field leaders can't read it. It's hard to read. To me, the schedule sometimes is more of a lagging indicator of what's actually going on in the field. You're updating your master schedule based on work that's either been done or hasn't been done. The benefit of last planner system and the weekly work planning, the look ahead schedules, is that it's easy for the field to follow, and it really it's what's informing that master Gantt schedule. And so when it comes to a high-rise building, and I think where you were going was like a high-rise building is a perfect building to implement lean and start talking about TAC planning and things like that because of the repetitiveness of the floors. And so if you're doing a pull plan and you understand all the handoffs that have to happen to pour out one of those floors, and then you can work your way back through the phasing of all 14 floors or whatever it could be, you're definitely going to get much more reliability than if you're pushing a schedule just trying to hit certain dates or pick up time in the schedule. So I don't know if I quite hit it there, but at least from what I heard from the question, maybe want to share that.
And thank you very much, Keyan. May I ask both of you what, as a specific recommendation, you would really give us as your most important topic for all the audience? What would you recommend as, let's say, everybody has to do to really get hands-on in the field and be successful with implementation of lean methodologies and lean philosophy?
I'll start with this because I want to wrap to make sure we have plenty of time for Romano to hit on his presentation. But for us, it is to start small. You got to start with the right small tools like we talked about. Start with a daily huddle. Get the team grooving on that. Make your communication visual. Start tracking your constraints in a visual manner and start to develop those relationships in the field. If you can do that alone, I guarantee the amount of value that team's going to get is going to be far greater than anything that they've experienced. And then you can get into last planner system and really start performing at a higher level. But if I could leave one lasting statement, it's to start small, don't get discouraged, and take the right small steps with using the right small tools to build that culture.
Yeah, building on that, lean, this is a journey, right? That's the beautiful thing about lean. It's all about continuous improvement. You're never done. That's what's so great about it. So don't get overwhelmed. Like Joe said, small bites at a time. And then over time, it's amazing how far your projects will come.
So thank you very much, Keyan, and thank you very much, Joe, for the insights you've offered, and all the best. And let's see what on your blog will appear in the next days and weeks.
Appreciate that.
Great having you here.